Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Harmony and watched the massive space station grow larger in the view screen. Kepler Station was the heart of galactic trade, a neutral ground where dozens of alien species came to do business. The station spun slowly against the backdrop of stars, its lights twinkling like jewels in the darkness. Jake had been coming here for 15 years, and it still impressed him. The communication officer turned toward him. "Captain, we're getting a priority message from Admiral Carter. She wants to see you as soon as we dock." Jake nodded and straightened his uniform. When Admiral Lisa Carter called for a meeting, it usually meant trouble somewhere in the galaxy. The docking procedure went smoothly, as it always did. The humans had a reputation for being excellent pilots and engineers. Other species often joked that humans could dock a ship in a thunderstorm and make it look easy. Jake walked through the familiar corridors of Kepler Station, passing shops and restaurants run by beings from across the galaxy. A group of tall, blue-skinned Altani merchants bowed politely as he passed. 3 reptilian Zephyrians in military uniforms gave him respectful nods. Admiral Carter was waiting in the diplomatic suite, along with Commander Ryan Hughes and Dr. Emma Walsh. Carter was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Hughes was tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of man who looked like he could handle any crisis. Dr. Walsh was young for a xenopsychologist, but she had written the book on alien behavior patterns that every human diplomat carried. "Jake, good to see you," Carter said, gesturing to a chair. "We have a situation developing in the Outer Rim. The Zephyrians are making noise about the Altani colonies again." Jake sat down and accepted a cup of coffee. The humans were famous throughout the galaxy for their coffee, and many species had tried to copy it without success. "How bad is it this time?" Jake asked. He had mediated disputes between the two species before. The Zephyrians were warriors by nature, always looking for a fight. The Altani were peaceful farmers and traders who just wanted to be left alone. It was a combination that led to regular conflicts. Hughes pulled up a holographic display showing the disputed star systems. War Chief Thrackmore is claiming that the Altani colonies are expanding into traditional Zephyrian hunting grounds. He's mobilized 3 battle fleets and is demanding that the Altani abandon their newest settlements. Dr. Walsh leaned forward. "I've been studying the psychological profiles of both leadership groups. Thrackmore is under pressure from his War Council to prove his strength. The Altani Elder Council is terrified, but won't abandon colonies where thousands of their people live. Neither side wants to back down." Carter nodded grimly. "The Galactic Council has asked us to mediate as usual. They trust us to find a peaceful solution." She paused and looked at each of them. "The council meeting is tomorrow. I want all of you there." The next day, Jake found himself in the massive council chambers of Kepler Station. Representatives from dozens of species filled the circular chamber, their different forms and colors creating a rainbow of galactic diversity. At the center of the chamber stood War Chief Thrackmore, a massive Zephyrian with scarred hide and gleaming fangs. His voice boomed through the translation devices as he spoke. "The weak Altani steal our ancestral lands while we sleep. They plant their farms where our warriors once hunted. This cannot be allowed to continue." His clawed hand slammed on the podium, making several smaller species flinch. Elder Morith of the Altani Council stood to respond. Her voice was soft and melodious, completely different from the Zephyrian war cry. "We seek only to feed our growing population. These worlds were empty when we found them. We harm no one with our settlements." The chamber erupted in argument. Some species supported the Zephyrian claims based on ancient tradition. Others backed the Altani right to settle empty worlds. The noise grew louder until Admiral Carter stood up. "Friends," she said, and somehow her quiet voice carried over the chaos. "We have dealt with similar disputes before. Violence serves no one. Perhaps we can find a solution that honors both traditions and needs." War Chief Thrackmore turned his yellow eyes toward Carter. "The humans speak of peace as always, but some things cannot be settled with words." Carter smiled calmly. "War Chief, surely a warrior of your reputation can see the wisdom in exploring all options before choosing battle. Give us 30 days to work with both sides. If we cannot find an acceptable solution, then you are free to pursue whatever course you think best." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew that humans were the galaxy's best mediators. In 200 years, they had prevented countless wars and settled thousands of disputes. Their patience was legendary. Their fairness was unquestioned. Thrackmore growled low in his throat but finally nodded. 30 days, human. But if your words fail, then my warriors will succeed where diplomacy could not. Elder Morath bowed gracefully. We accept the human mediation with gratitude. After the council session, Jake walked with Dr. Walsh through the station's observation deck. Through the transparent walls, they could see ships from across the galaxy coming and going. Human vessels were among them, sleek diplomatic ships and bulky cargo haulers. What do you think? Jake asked. Can we actually solve this one? Walsh was quiet for a moment, watching a Zephyrian battleship maneuver away from the station. The psychological pressures are intense on both sides. Thrackmore needs a victory to maintain his position. The Altani cannot abandon their people. But humans have been dealing with impossible situations for centuries. Jake nodded. It was true. Humans had a gift for finding solutions that no one else could see. They were patient where others were hasty. They were understanding where others were judgmental. They listened when others only wanted to shout. Over the next few days, Jake watched as Admiral Carter and her team went to work. They met with Zephyrian war leaders and Altani farmers. They studied maps and population reports. They asked questions that seemed simple, but somehow got to the heart of each problem. Commander Hughes took charge of gathering information about both fleets and their capabilities. It was important to understand what kind of damage a war might cause, he explained. Dr. Walsh interviewed leaders from both sides, building detailed profiles of their motivations and fears. Jake noticed that human ships were coming and going from Kepler Station more frequently than usual. Trade vessels, research ships, and diplomatic couriers all seemed to have business in the area. When he mentioned this to Carter, she smiled. Word travels fast in the galaxy, Jake. When humans get involved in a crisis, everyone wants to help. We've built a lot of goodwill over the centuries. It was true. Humans had friends everywhere. They had helped the crystal-based silicoids develop new mining techniques. They had shown the insect-like hive queens how to improve their agricultural yields. They had mediated trade disputes, settled border conflicts, and prevented wars on hundreds of worlds. As the 30-day deadline approached, Jake felt optimistic. If anyone could find a way to prevent this war, it would be the humans. They had never failed before. Their patience and wisdom had brought peace to countless conflicts. He had no idea that everything he believed about his own species was about to change forever. 3 months had passed since the peace talks began on Havana Prime. Captain Jake Morrison watched the morning briefing display with growing concern. A red warning light blinked on the tactical screen, showing the location where a Zephyrian patrol had attacked an Altani merchant vessel just 6 hours earlier. The temporary ceasefire that Admiral Carter had worked so hard to establish was cracking. Commander Ryan Hughes stood at the front of the briefing room, his face grim. The merchant ship Gentle Current was carrying medical supplies to the Altani colony on Kepler 7. The Zephyrian patrol claimed they were smuggling weapons. 3 Altani died in the attack. Dr. Emma Walsh shook her head. This will push the Altani leadership toward panic. Elder Morath has been struggling to keep her people calm. An attack on a medical transport will be seen as proof that the Zephyrians cannot be trusted. Admiral Carter entered the room, moving with the quick efficiency that Jake had come to know well. Her gray hair was pulled back tightly, and her eyes showed the strain of months of careful negotiation. I've just finished speaking with both sides. War Chief Thrackmore claims his patrol commander acted without orders. Elder Morath is demanding immediate human protection for all Altani shipping. Jake leaned forward. What do we tell them? Carter was quiet for a moment, then turned to Hughes. Ryan, how quickly can you get Colonel Danny Price and his Peace Brigade to the disputed zone? Hughes checked his tablet. The 47th Human Peace Brigade can be there in 4 days. They're currently finishing humanitarian work in the Centauri sector. Good, send them immediately. Full defensive posture. But make it clear they're there to protect civilians, not to take sides. Carter turned to Dr. Walsh. Emma, I need you to prepare psychological profiles for every Zephyrian patrol commander in the area. If we can understand what drove this attack, maybe we can prevent others. Jake watched as the team went into action. This was how humans worked, he thought. When crisis struck, they responded with calm efficiency and careful planning. No angry threats or demands for revenge, just methodical problem-solving and a focus on preventing further violence. Over the next week, Jake saw the human response expand throughout the disputed systems. Colonel Price arrived with his Peace Brigade, which consisted of 200 specialists trained in conflict de-escalation. They established monitoring stations at key points along the border between Zephyrian and Altani space. Each station was equipped with advanced sensors and communication equipment, all designed to watch for signs of trouble and call for help if needed. The galaxy praised the human response. News broadcasts across dozens of worlds showed human peacekeepers working alongside both Zephyrian and Altani officials. Captain Kevin Young brought in a merchant fleet to help transport supplies safely through the disputed zone. Dr. Amy Foster established research stations to study the asteroid fields where most of the territorial disputes were happening. Jake found himself impressed by how quickly his fellow humans had mobilized. Lieutenant Sarah Kim led reconnaissance teams that mapped every shipping lane and trade route in the area. Major Tony Rodriguez organized cultural exchange programs, bringing young officers from both sides to human ships for training in peaceful conflict resolution. Everything was done with the calm professionalism that humans were known for throughout the galaxy. But as Jake spent more time observing the operation, he began to notice things that seemed odd. The human monitoring stations were positioned perfectly to observe all military movements in the area, not just potential trouble spots. The reconnaissance teams were gathering far more detailed information than seemed necessary for peacekeeping. The cultural exchange programs involved remarkably thorough tours of alien military facilities. During one of his regular meetings with Admiral Carter, Jake mentioned his observations. "Admiral, I'm seeing a lot of intelligence gathering going on, more than we usually do for a peacekeeping mission." Carter looked at him with those sharp gray eyes.
"Jake, you've been doing this for 15 years.
You know that good peacekeeping requires good information. We need to understand both sides completely if we're going to help them find a lasting solution." That made sense, Jake thought. Humans had always been thorough in their approach to diplomacy. Their success rate was legendary precisely because they took the time to understand every aspect of a conflict. Still, something about the scale of the current operation felt different. Lieutenant Commander Alex Stone was running the intelligence coordination from his station on Kepler Station. Jake had worked with Stone before and respected his analytical mind. When Jake asked him about the extensive data collection, Stone's answer was similar to Carter's. "Captain, we're dealing with two species that have been in conflict for generations. The Zephyrians have a warrior culture that values strength and territorial control. The Altani have a peaceful nature that sometimes makes them appear weak to more aggressive species. To broker a real peace, we need to understand not just what they want, but how they think and what they fear." Stone pulled up a holographic display showing ship movements throughout the sector. "Look at this pattern. Zephyrian patrols have been increasing their frequency near Altani trade routes, but they're not just being aggressive. They're testing response times and defensive capabilities. If war breaks out, they want to know exactly how long it will take Altani reinforcements to arrive at each colony." Jake studied the display. Stone was right. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. So we need to understand their military thinking to predict where the next flashpoint might occur. Exactly. And that means we need to know everything about both fleets, both command structures, and both strategic doctrines. Stone highlighted several areas on the map. Dr. Walsh's psychological profiles are helping us understand individual commanders. But we also need to grasp how each species approaches warfare at a fundamental level. Over the following weeks, Jake watched as more human ships arrived in the sector. They came for various reasons. Commander Nicole Brown brought medical supplies and humanitarian aid. Captain Frank Miller arrived with a survey ship to map safe shipping corridors. Major Scott Davis led engineering teams that helped upgrade communication systems on both Zephyrian and Altani worlds. Each new arrival was welcomed by the local populations. The humans were bringing help after all. Food for hungry colonists, medical care for the injured, technical assistance for outdated infrastructure, and always the promise of peaceful solutions to seemingly impossible problems. Jake began to realize just how extensive the human presence had become. There were now human personnel on dozens of worlds throughout both empires. Human ships regularly visited every major military installation under the guise of delivering supplies or providing technical assistance. Human researchers had established monitoring stations that could observe every ship movement in the sector. The most impressive part was how natural it all seemed. Humans had been helping other species for 2 centuries. Their reputation for generosity and technical skill meant that doors opened for them everywhere. When a human ship requested permission to land, few species bothered to ask detailed questions. When human engineers offered to upgrade alien systems, most species accepted gratefully. Dr. Walsh published her research on interspecies conflict resolution, and it became required reading at diplomatic academies across the galaxy. Her insights into Zephyrian warrior psychology and Altani peacemaking traditions were praised as breakthrough work in the field of xenopsychology. What the galaxy didn't know was that Dr. Walsh's real work involved mapping the psychological pressure points of entire civilizations. She knew exactly what fears drove each species, what hopes motivated them, and what buttons to push to make them react in predictable ways. Her published papers were just the public face of a much deeper and more comprehensive study. As the fourth month of peacekeeping operations began, Jake realized that humans now had personnel positioned throughout both empires. They were trusted advisors, helpful technicians, generous suppliers, and skilled mediators. Everyone was grateful for human assistance. Nobody suspected that the galaxy's most patient peacekeepers were quietly preparing for something entirely different. 2 years had passed since the first ceasefire agreement, and Captain Jake Morrison found himself standing in the command center of what had once been a simple monitoring station. The facility on the border world of Haven's Rest had grown into something much larger. Banks of computers hummed quietly while dozens of human technicians monitored screens showing ship movements across half the galaxy. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos looked up from her workstation as Jake approached. "Captain, we're tracking 17 Zephyrian battle groups and 43 Altani defense squadrons across the sector. Every major fleet movement is being recorded and analyzed." Jake nodded, though something about the scope of the operation still made him uncomfortable. The monitoring stations had multiplied over the past 2 years, spreading throughout both empires like a vast network of electronic eyes and ears. Admiral Carter insisted it was necessary for maintaining the fragile peace, but the scale seemed enormous for a peacekeeping mission. "Any signs of trouble?" Jake asked. Santos pulled up a tactical display. "War Chief Thrackmore has been moving his personal fleet closer to the Altani core worlds. Our sources inside his command structure suggest he's growing impatient with the diplomatic process. Dr. Walsh believes he's under increasing pressure from younger war leaders who see the extended negotiations as a sign of weakness." Jake studied the display. Red dots showed Zephyrian ships, blue dots showed Altani vessels, and green dots marked human positions. There were a lot of green dots. Human ships seemed to be everywhere, positioned at key points throughout both empires. Trade vessels, research ships, diplomatic couriers, and peacekeeping forces had spread across hundreds of star systems. Commander Ryan Bennett entered the command center, carrying a data pad filled with status reports. "Jake, good to see you. I've just finished inspecting the outer monitoring posts. We now have complete sensor coverage of both empires' military movements. Nothing larger than a patrol boat can move without us knowing about it." The word sent a chill down Jake's spine. Complete sensor coverage sounded less like peacekeeping and more like military surveillance. "Ryan, that seems like extensive monitoring for a diplomatic mission." Bennett looked surprised. "Jake, we're trying to prevent a war between two major galactic powers. The Zephyrians have over 300 warships. The Altani have defensive fleets protecting dozens of colony worlds. If fighting breaks out, millions could die. We need to see trouble coming before it starts." That made sense, Jake supposed. Humans had always been thorough in their approach to conflict prevention. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in the nature of their mission. The human presence in this sector had become so extensive that they seemed to know more about both empires than the empires knew about themselves. Captain Nicole Brown arrived from the Altani homeworld with her latest humanitarian mission report. The infrastructure upgrades are complete on 15 more Altani worlds. Major Davis and his engineering teams have modernized their power grids, communication networks, and defensive systems. The Altani leadership is extremely grateful for our technical assistance. Jake had seen similar reports from throughout Zephyrian space. Human engineers had upgraded military installations, improved supply networks, and enhanced communication systems across both empires. Everyone praised human generosity and technical skill. Both sides trusted human advisors completely. Dr. Emma Walsh emerged from her research laboratory, carrying a thick folder of psychological profiles. Over the past 2 years, She had interviewed hundreds of military and political leaders from both species. Her published work on interspecies conflict resolution had made her the most famous xenopsychologist in the galaxy. "Emma, how are the leadership assessments coming along?" Jake asked. Walsh smiled. "I've completed detailed psychological profiles for every significant figure in both governments and military hierarchies. War Chief Thrackmore, for example, responds predictably to challenges to his authority. He becomes more aggressive when he feels disrespected, but he also becomes less careful about strategic planning. Elder Morath tends to seek consensus among her advisors, but she can be pushed toward decisive action if she believes her people are in immediate danger." Jake frowned. "That sounds like you're learning how to manipulate them rather than understanding them." Walsh's expression didn't change. "Understanding and influence are closely related, Jake. If we know how leaders will react to different situations, we can help guide them toward peaceful decisions rather than violent ones. It's all part of successful conflict resolution." Major Tony Rodriguez joined their conversation, fresh from another cultural exchange program. "The latest group of young officers has completed their training aboard our ships. We've had visitors from both empires learning about human diplomatic techniques and peaceful conflict resolution. They return to their home fleets with a much better understanding of how humans approach these situations." Jake had attended some of these cultural exchanges. The young alien officers were always impressed by human ships and technology. They toured human facilities, learned about human military doctrine, and shared stories about their own forces and equipment. It was all very friendly and educational. What bothered Jake was how much information flowed in one direction. The alien visitors were eager to share details about their ships, their weapons, their tactics, and their strategies. They saw it as building trust and friendship with their human hosts. But Jake noticed that humans were much more reserved about sharing similar information. Lieutenant Commander Alex Stone approached with his daily intelligence summary. "Captain, we've completed our analysis of both empires' command and control systems. We know the location of every major military headquarters, the identity of every senior commander, and the standard operating procedures for both fleets." Jake looked at the data pad Stone offered him. The information was incredibly detailed. Ship specifications, weapon capabilities, defensive strengths and weaknesses, supply requirements, maintenance schedules, and crew rotations for hundreds of vessels. It was the kind of intelligence that would take years of careful espionage to gather. "How did we get all this information?" Jake asked. Stone seemed surprised by the question. "Standard diplomatic and peacekeeping procedures, Captain. We've been working closely with both sides for 2 years. They trust us completely. When you're trying to prevent a war, people are usually happy to share information that might help you succeed." That evening, Jake walked through the corridors of the monitoring station and tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Human personnel were everywhere, working at computer terminals, analyzing data, and coordinating with other facilities throughout the sector. The operation had grown far beyond anything he had seen in 15 years of diplomatic service. He found Admiral Carter in her private office, studying holographic displays that showed the positions of every military unit in both empires. The level of detail was staggering. Carter could see not just where ships were located, but what condition they were in, how well supplied they were, and when they were scheduled to move. "Admiral, I need to ask you something. What exactly are we preparing for?" Carter looked at him for a long moment. "Jake, we're preparing for peace. But peace sometimes requires being ready for war. The galaxy has been in conflict for thousands of years. Humans have spent 2 centuries learning from that history." She gestured to the displays around them. "We know more about these 2 empires than they know about themselves. We understand their strengths and weaknesses, their fears and motivations, their capabilities and limitations. When the time comes to impose a lasting solution, we'll be ready." The word impose struck Jake as odd. Humans had always negotiated solutions, not imposed them. But before he could ask what Carter meant, she continued. "The galaxy trusts us, Jake. They see us as patient peacekeepers who never give up hope for diplomatic solutions. That trust has opened doors and created opportunities that we couldn't have achieved any other way." Jake left the meeting with more questions than answers. As he prepared for sleep, he couldn't stop thinking about the vast network of human personnel, monitoring stations, and intelligence-gathering operations that had spread throughout 2 major galactic empires. Everyone still saw it as peacekeeping, but it looked more and more like preparation for something else entirely. The galaxy still trusted human patience and wisdom. They had no idea that human patience had been building towards something far more decisive than anyone imagined. The emergency alert woke Captain Jake Morrison at 3 in the morning. Red lights flashed throughout the monitoring station as klaxons blared their urgent warning. Jake rolled out of bed and rushed to the command center, where Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos was coordinating with multiple stations across the sector. "What's happening?" Jake asked, still pulling on his uniform. Santos looked up from her console with grim eyes. "War Chief Thrakmor has launched a full-scale assault on the Altani homeworld. 300 Zephyrian warships jumped into the system 2 hours ago. The Altani defense fleet is completely outnumbered." Jake felt his blood turn cold. After 2 years of careful diplomacy, the thing they had all feared most was finally happening. "Where's Admiral Carter?" "She's in emergency session with the Galactic Council. The attack broke the ceasefire completely. Thousands of Altani civilians are already dead." Santos pulled up tactical displays showing the battle raging around the peaceful Altani homeworld. Zephyrian ships were pounding the planet's defenses while Altani vessels fought desperately to protect their people. Commander Ryan Bennett burst into the command center, his face showing the strain of a man who had been awakened by catastrophe. "Jake, thank God you're here. We're getting reports from across the sector. This isn't just an attack on the homeworld. Zephyrian fleets are hitting Altani colonies on 17 different worlds simultaneously." The scope of the assault was staggering. Jake watched the tactical displays as red dots representing Zephyrian ships appeared throughout Altani space. It was a coordinated attack on a scale that would have taken months of planning. War Chief Thrakmor had been preparing for this while pretending to negotiate. Dr. Emma Walsh entered the command center carrying her emergency kit. "I've been monitoring Zephyrian communications. Thrakmor is telling his warriors that the time for talk is over."
He says the Altani have shown their weakness through 2 years of delay and negotiation.
His war council has convinced him that a quick, decisive victory will establish Zephyrian dominance throughout this entire sector. Jake stared at the displays showing the destruction. Everything they had worked for was falling apart. 2 years of patient diplomacy, thousands of hours of negotiations, and careful relationship building with both sides had all been wasted. The Zephyrians had chosen war anyway. Admiral Carter's voice came through the communication system from Kepler Station. Her words were broadcast to every human facility in the sector. "All personnel, this is Admiral Carter. The diplomatic solution has failed. War Chief Thrakmor has chosen to break the ceasefire and attack the Altani people. The Galactic Council has declared the peace process officially ended." Jake could hear the pain in Carter's voice. She had invested everything in finding a peaceful solution. Now she was watching innocent people die because diplomacy had not been enough to overcome Zephyrian aggression. Carter continued her broadcast. "For 200 years, humanity has served as peacekeepers for this galaxy. We have negotiated, mediated, and compromised in the hope that reason could triumph over violence. Today we have learned that some species cannot be reached through peaceful means." The communication system crackled as Carter paused. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Gone was the diplomatic tone Jake had known for years. In its place was something harder and more determined. "The Galactic Council has requested immediate human intervention to stop the Zephyrian assault. For the first time in our history as a spacefaring species, humanity will abandon its role as neutral peacekeepers. We will go to war." Jake felt the world shift around him. Humans didn't go to war. They prevented wars. They found peaceful solutions when everyone else wanted to fight. The idea of human warships engaging in combat seemed impossible. Santos looked up from her console with wide eyes. "Captain, I'm getting reports from monitoring stations throughout the sector. Human facilities are activating systems I've never seen before." Before Jake could ask what she meant, the monitoring station around him began to change. Walls that had looked like simple administrative panels slid away to reveal banks of military sensors and weapon control systems. The peaceful research facility transformed before his eyes into something that looked like a military command center. Bennett was staring at his workstation in amazement. "Jake, these monitoring stations weren't just watching the Zephyrian and Altani fleets. They were targeting them. Every major military installation in both empires has been locked into our fire control systems for months." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you talking about?" Major Tony Rodriguez entered the command center carrying a data pad filled with new orders. Captain, I've just received authorization codes for Operation Swift Justice. All human personnel throughout the sector are activating combat protocols immediately. The words made no sense to Jake. Combat protocols? Tony, we're peacekeepers. We don't have combat protocols. Rodriguez looked at him with an expression Jake had never seen before. It was the look of a soldier preparing for battle, not a diplomat hoping for peace. Jake, we've always had combat protocols. We just never needed them before. Lieutenant Commander Alex Stone approached with a tactical display that showed human positions throughout both empires. What Jake saw made his hands shake. The green dots he had been watching for 2 years weren't monitoring stations and research facilities. They were military bases perfectly positioned to control every major strategic point in both empires. Stone, what is this? Stone's voice was calm and professional. Captain, these are the forward positions that have been established over the past 2 years. Every major Zephyrian and Altani military installation is within range of human weapons. Every supply line, communication hub, and government facility is covered. Jake stared at the display in horror. You're talking about attacking both sides. The Altani are the victims here. They're being slaughtered by the Zephyrians. Dr. Walsh approached with her psychological analysis files. Jake, the Altani leadership has been just as unwilling to accept a permanent solution as the Zephyrians. They wanted to maintain their territorial expansion while avoiding the consequences. Both sides have chosen their positions based on self-interest rather than galactic peace. Admiral Carter's voice came through the communication system again. All stations prepare for simultaneous engagement of all military targets in both the Zephyrian Empire and the Altani Republic. Operation Swift Justice begins in 60 minutes. Jake felt the room spinning around him. Admiral, you can't attack both sides. That's not peacekeeping. That's conquest. Carter's response came directly to his station. Jake, peacekeeping has failed. For 200 years, we've tried to manage galactic conflicts through negotiation and compromise. All we've accomplished is giving warlike species time to prepare for bigger and more destructive wars. The displays around the command center showed human ships throughout the sector dropping their peaceful disguises. Diplomatic vessels revealed hidden weapon systems. Research ships activated military sensors. Cargo haulers opened their holds to release squadrons of fighters. Santos looked up from her console with shock written across her face. Captain, I'm showing over 2,000 human warships throughout the sector. Where did they all come from? Stone answered her. They've been here all along. Hidden in asteroid fields disguised as civilian vessels or stationed at facilities that everyone assumed were peaceful installations. The galaxy trusted us completely, so they never looked too closely at what we were really doing. Jake watched in stunned silence as the true scope of human preparation became clear. For 2 years, while everyone believed humans were working for peace, they had actually been positioning forces for the most comprehensive military operation in galactic history. Admiral Carter's final transmission came through clearly. All units commence Operation Swift Justice. The age of human patience is over. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command center and watched the galaxy change forever. The tactical displays showed a symphony of destruction that had been choreographed with terrifying precision. Human forces struck simultaneously across hundreds of star systems, hitting both Zephyrian and Altani military targets with overwhelming force. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos read from her status reports with a voice that shook slightly. All primary objectives have been secured. Zephyrian Fleet Command on Thrakos Prime is offline. The Altani Defense Headquarters on New Haven has been neutralized. Both empires have lost their central command structures. The speed of the assault defied comprehension. Jake had expected a long, brutal war between human forces and the combined might of 2 galactic empires. Instead, he was watching the systematic dismantling of both civilizations' military power in a matter of hours. Commander Ryan Bennett looked up from his workstation with amazement. Jake, the Zephyrian 3rd Battle Fleet just surrendered. That's War Chief Thrakmore's personal command. They're requesting terms. Lieutenant Commander Alex Stone pulled up a galactic overview that showed the scope of human victory. Red icons representing destroyed or disabled enemy forces covered the display. Captain, organized resistance has effectively ended. Both empires have lost between 70 and 80% of their military assets. The remaining forces are scattered and cut off from command. Jake stared at the display in stunned silence. Less than 12 hours ago, he had been a peacekeeper, trying to prevent war between 2 powerful empires. Now he was apparently a conqueror watching those same empires collapse under human assault. Dr. Emma Walsh entered the command center carrying a communication device. "Jake, I'm getting surrender requests from both sides. Elder Morath of the Altani is asking for humanitarian terms. War Chief Thrackmore wants to negotiate military honors for his remaining warriors." The irony was overwhelming. The same leaders who had spent 2 years resisting human diplomatic efforts were now begging for human mercy. The species that had trusted human peacekeepers completely had discovered too late what human patience had really been preparing for. Admiral Carter's image appeared on the main display, transmitted from the bridge of a massive warship that Jake had never seen before. The vessel behind her was sleek and deadly, bristling with weapons that looked decades ahead of anything in the known galaxy. "All stations, this is Admiral Carter aboard the UNS Dominion. Phase 1 of Operation Swift Justice is complete. Both the Zephyrian Empire and the Altani Republic have been neutralized as military threats. We are now beginning Phase 2. Jake found his voice. "Admiral, what is Phase 2? Carter's expression was calm but determined. "Jake, we're going to build something that should have existed centuries ago. A galaxy where war is impossible because only one species has the power to wage it." General Patricia Lee appeared beside Carter on the transmission. Jake had heard of Lee but never seen her before. She was the commander of human military forces that Jake hadn't known existed until today. Her uniform was black with silver insignia that looked nothing like the peaceful blue and white of the diplomatic service. "Captain Morrison, you're witnessing the end of the old galactic order. For thousands of years, different species have fought wars that accomplished nothing except death and destruction. Humans have spent 2 centuries studying this pattern and preparing to break it permanently." Jake felt sick to his stomach. "General, we just destroyed 2 civilizations. How is that breaking a pattern of violence?" Lee's voice was patient but firm. "Captain, we ended 2 civilizations' ability to wage war. That's completely different from destroying them. The Zephyrian and Altani people are still alive. Their cultures will continue, but they will never again have the power to kill each other or anyone else." Santos looked up from her console. "Captain, I'm getting reports from throughout the galaxy. Human forces are demanding the surrender of every major military installation on over 300 worlds. Species that weren't even involved in this conflict are being told to disarm." The scope of the operation was becoming clear. This wasn't just about stopping a war between 2 empires. Humans were demanding the military surrender of every spacefaring civilization in the galaxy. Major Tony Rodriguez approached with a list of species that were complying with human demands. "The Crystalline Confederation has agreed to deactivate their defense fleets. The Hive Queens are ordering their warrior castes to stand down. The Silicon Republic is surrendering their automated defense systems." Dr. Walsh pulled up psychological profiles on her workstation. "Most species are choosing compliance over resistance. They've seen what happened to the Zephyrians and Altani. Nobody wants to face the full force of human military power." Jake looked around the command center at his fellow humans. These people he had worked with for years, who he had thought were dedicated peacekeepers, were calmly coordinating the conquest of the entire galaxy. Their efficiency was terrifying. "How long have you been planning this?" Jake asked. Stone answered him. "Captain, humans have been preparing for this possibility since we first encountered other spacefaring species 200 years ago. Every diplomatic mission, every peacekeeping operation, every cultural exchange was also an intelligence-gathering opportunity." The pieces were falling into place in Jake's mind. Human merchants had mapped every trade route. Human researchers had studied every military technology. Human diplomats had learned the weaknesses of every government. Human peacekeepers had positioned themselves at every strategic location. Admiral Carter's voice came through the communication system again. "All personnel, we are receiving formal surrender requests from 47 different species. The Galactic Council is asking for an emergency session to discuss terms." Bennett looked up from his workstation. "Admiral, what terms are we offering?" Carter's response was broadcast to every human facility in the galaxy. "Gentlemen and ladies, the terms are simple. Every species will maintain their governments, their cultures, and their rights to peaceful development. But military forces capable of interstellar warfare will be dismantled permanently." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "And if they refuse?" General Lee answered him directly. "Captain, we've demonstrated what happens to species that choose warfare over peace. The galaxy has seen that human patience has limits." Over the next few hours, Jake watched as the new galactic order took shape. Human administrators were already arriving at former military installations throughout both empires. Captain Nicole Brown was coordinating humanitarian aid for civilian populations affected by the fighting. Major Scott Davis was helping to convert military facilities into civilian infrastructure. The transformation was remarkably smooth. Humans had spent years building relationships with civilian populations throughout the galaxy. Most people actually welcomed human administration, especially after seeing how quickly and decisively humans could end conflicts that had raged for generations. Dr. Walsh approached Jake with a final psychological assessment. The galaxy is accepting the new reality faster than we projected. Most species have realized that human rule means the end of interstellar warfare. For civilian populations, that's actually an improvement over the constant threat of invasion and conquest. Jake looked at the display showing human ships patrolling throughout the galaxy. Peaceful trade vessels were already moving freely through space that had been a war zone just hours earlier. The speed of the transition was almost miraculous. Admiral Carter's final transmission of the day came directly to Jake's station. "Jake, I know this is difficult for you. You joined the diplomatic service because you wanted to help keep peace in the galaxy. Well, you've succeeded. There will never be another interstellar war." Jake stared out at the stars through the command center's viewport. The galaxy looked the same, but everything had changed. Humans were no longer the patient peacekeepers who negotiated between warring species. They were the ultimate authority that had made war itself obsolete. The age of human patience was over. The age of human dominance had begun.